Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Stacey Roshan, and I'm here with Bobby Pollicino, and we are going to be presenting tonight on using Pear Deck for professional development. So we will talk about using Pear Deck for staff and faculty meetings, and also Pear Deck for asynchronous professional development. So how you as an ed tech coach might be able to use it to onboard your whole faculty and provide different PD opportunities. If you are on Twitter and would like to follow, I'll talk about myself. I am at BuddyXO on Twitter. I also have my blog information on the screen. And my role at Bullis School is Director of Innovation and Educational Technology, which pretty much means that I get to work with teachers K through 12 in integrating these tools into the classroom and thinking about how we can thoughtfully use them to redesign lessons. So I'll hand it off to Bobby.
Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. My name is Bobby Pollicino, and I am head of the upper school at Bullis. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at BullisUS, capital US. And Stacey and I are excited to deliver this presentation. We've worked collaboratively for just over 3 years now in this specific area. I mean, we work together a lot across the school, but specifically around how we could engage our faculty in our professional development program and also in our faculty meeting. So we're excited to get started.
We are going to let about the first 30-ish people into this Pear Deck to engage with us to just show some of these features. So I'm going to put that code on the screen, and I will take it off the screen when we have about 30 people joining, and then I'll ask that you please don't join with this code, but we will be sharing these slides so that everybody can get them. But if you would like to join, the code is now on the screen. You can go to joinpd.com and use the code. I see some people coming on. We got people from all over in here. Okay. I'm going to move on because we've probably got enough people. So if you were not able to join, you can just drop your answers in the chat, anything that you want to add. See where some people are joining in from.
All over.
Yeah. And what is your role?
It's great seeing the variety of roles on here, Stacey.
Yeah. Love it. So I think we got people logging in here, but this is a view that we really like using a lot is the grid layout view here, because you can get a lot of answers up on the screen and get a good glimpse, especially if you're in a faculty meeting with, you know, about this size audience. You can see how nice it is. And if you could just type in what you are hoping to learn today. And again, you can use the chat if you're not in the Pear Deck and you want to add anything. I see a question, do I use the bit.ly to join? The bit.ly that Pear Deck dropped into the chat is just the slides, so you wouldn't be able to engage with the Pear Deck because we're kind of at max capacity there. But that would give you a copy of the slides that you can follow later. So that's what Bitly link is. All right. So I'm seeing some just like inspiration, looking for ideas, getting more familiar, tips for using Pear Deck. Hopefully we'll cover a lot of these things today. And yeah, how to use Pear Deck to run a Zoom teacher meeting. I think that's one of the best ways to use it, is just to be able to, get everybody's responses all in one place. It's so much easier to manage than a chat in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's get started. Well, we did want to ask how many people, what your comfort level with Pear Deck was, because that might set the tone for some of our questions. Okay. So most people are familiar. Let's get started.
So now that we've walked through a little bit of your background and your knowledge, we wanted to talk about how we're using it for our faculty meetings at Bullis. Just by doing that exercise, Stacey and I were able to get some real-time feedback on who we're talking with and what we're doing. Obviously, the people that you work closely with at your school, you're already going to have a little bit of knowledge around that. But it's the feedback that's so helpful. And as we talk about having our meetings remote now, which so many of us are doing, you start to wonder, where is the focus, where's the engagement? And so you look at the graph that Stacey has up there, and you can see that people are doing many different things besides actually paying attention. And so what can we do to have this information so that we can best serve our faculty and our staff when we have this time together? We're mindful of how long our meetings are because of the amount of time we're spending on screens. So let's make sure we're intentional with our meetings, and let's make sure that we're doing our best to clearly communicate what it is that we want to do and that we're trying to do.
See how people are feeling at their typical faculty meeting.
I know the administrators are the ones putting on the smiley face. Or perhaps the administrator. There's only one dot there. Oh, there's a couple.
There we go.
So it was probably around 3 or 4 years ago that Stacey came to talk with me about the work she was doing in her role. Bullis has identified a few tech tools that we wanted to really invest our time and energy in, and really focus on those and give teachers some guidance and some coaching around them. And we weren't quite seeing the buy-in that we had hoped. Stacey was putting together fantastic programs. And so she came to me and said, what do you think about doing this at a faculty meeting? Would you be open to it? Would you be open to modeling this for teachers? And I thought it was a great idea. Quite honestly, I was a little bit nervous because of how it might go. The fact that it might not go well, not knowing what the response would be or the feedback. But that's exactly what the modeling was for, because teachers are feeling the same way. How am I going to engage them in the discussion on Gatsby? How am I going to introduce Moll's Law? How am I going to go through these different lessons when I'm not really comfortable with this? The other piece that was really important, and this is pre-COVID, quite honestly, when we started this, is this idea of empathy across multiple fronts, right? And so we just saw people's responses about these faculty meetings. And so if I stop and think about the time that I'm asking, so in our case, it's 75 minutes about every other week. Am I being respectful of that time? How are we using that time? What would those teachers otherwise be doing? And how can I be respectful about that? The other part is that the teacher is now being asked to serve as a student in this role. And it's so important for us as teachers to be able to stop and think about the student experience when we are delivering a lesson, when we are guiding a discussion, or whatever it may be. And quite honestly, as this has been going on, there have been some teachers who have said, are you sending another Pear Deck this week? Which is a fair question, and I appreciate it. But I think it's a great question to ask back to them in terms of how are you changing up your lessons in classroom? What are you doing for your students? But now post-COVID that we're still doing it, in sort of the mix of it right now, it allows us to engage more deeply. It's not just talking on a Zoom or a Google Meet. So it's been something that we started before school had to close, and it's something that we're able to do while we're closed and something that we'll continue to do. And then lastly, it provides for a tremendous amount of collaboration, not only between Stacey and me as we look at meetings coming up, but also between me and the faculty. So that's really sort of what's guided us to this point right now. And so when you start to think about, opportunities for teachers and giving teacher voice, that's certainly a question that comes up all the time. Do teachers have a voice? And so going back to that empathy piece, when I'm developing our agenda and this Pear Deck, I have it go out on Thursday before a Tuesday or a Wednesday faculty meeting. And it's a self-paced Pear Deck. The faculty then have time to go into it when it fits their schedule. And what it also does, it gives me time to reflect on the answers that they're putting in there. So some teachers will do it that day. Friday morning, I'll go in and I'll see responses from teachers. I'm going to see questions that need a more timely response, and I can immediately address that to a teacher. So we're not waiting until Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon when a teacher might ask me a question because they haven't had a chance to come and see me. They've been busy teaching, whatever it might be. If you're fully remote right now, we're fortunate to be in a hybrid model, but if you're fully remote, you're not seeing your teachers. And so they're not seeing you in the hallway to remind them, oh, I had that question I had to ask you. So that's a great way for me to have connections there and for people to share questions. The other piece is with some of the questions, I can see a theme. So I might recognize that I really did not communicate the message in a way that I thought. And it's so important to be able to get that feedback and then to be able to address that and to be able to say in a meeting, when I shared out why we had this special schedule on this date, it was clear that many of you were still wrestling with the idea of why we were doing it, how it impacted our class time, what the overall benefit was. And so I'm going to use the time now to help clarify that. So what then comes out of that is you're having more meaningful conversations, and that leads to more meaningful work being done. And that's so important in our relationships in schools. And again, it goes back to modeling and the conversations you're having with your teachers and how those can then happen with their students in their classroom. So this was something Stacey had put in here. And Stacey, I'm going to turn this back over to you for a moment just to talk about sort of this tweet you put out and the conversations you and I have had.
Yeah, so this was actually one of the most common questions that I was getting when I was talking to some other coaches about how our level of engagement with Pear Deck really went to the next level when Bobby started using it. And so people ask me, like, how do you get your principal to do this, to make time for it, to buy into it? And so I kind of put the question out on Twitter so that we could share this with everybody. But, it really does start with that trusting relationship. And I'm so lucky to have a principal whose door is open, who is open and receptive to making some of these changes and trying something new. And for us to have that partnership where we kind of start by building some of it together, because that was how we started. Bobby would invite me into his office when he had kind of created some of the beginning slides, and then I would add the interactivity. And then now Bobby creates it completely by himself. There's nothing that I need to do there, but it was a process of us chatting together, us talking through things together, us thinking about the question types that we wanted to embed and add in there. And it is an ongoing collaboration where sometimes I'll find a new template slide that seems really interesting, and Bobby will pick up with that and infuse it into his Pear Deck, because then teachers are able to actually not just see a little tip that I send, but experience it and feel it and see it from the lens of student.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so here we just pulled a couple different Pear Deck slides that we've used over the years. And one of the things, again, with Stacey coming in and being so open and really being a coach for me and guiding me and making suggestions, something like, hey, do you think maybe we could work Flipgrid into one of our meetings, or, do something else? So if you look at that top one there, staff growth and development, again, going back to, am I being respectful of time? Well, I put the Flipgrid into the Pear Deck, and it has the directions and the explanation for what we're doing and why. So I'm not using 5 minutes at a faculty meeting. We only have 75 minutes together. And how we're going to use that time, it needs to be effective. It needs to be collegial. It needs to include face-to-face conversations amongst our teachers. So again, with the Pear Deck going out on Thursday, people have time through the weekend, even Monday before a Tuesday or Wednesday meeting, to take a look at that Flipgrid and to be able to see what we're doing. And there's also some context around everything else that's happening, because they see all the slides. You're not just putting out a one-page agenda with some bullet points. Looking down at the reach for the solution, so we have 2 slides we're going to talk about that are already created by Pear Deck, which is fantastic. I think we all know as teachers, having someone else do the work for you is great. So in this particular case, this was from our opening meeting, and I wanted to talk about resilience. We were coming into the school year, we were very intent on opening face-to-face in a hybrid model, which means our teachers have half the class in the classroom in front of them, half of them at home, and they're teaching both simultaneously in those 2 different modes. And so taking this pre-made Pear Deck slide about reach for the solution, at the very top, I put in become more resilient. And then there's 3 layers there for teachers to fill out. Talk about tremendous insight I gather of each of our teachers, of where they are right now as we're coming back to school. This was done the week before the week before school started in our opening meetings. It was just a fantastic way for me to see where people were feeling and to provide more encouragement to some, to reach out to some and ask them if they can talk to other members of their department, but really put us in a very good place. And the same with the top right one, what's filling your bucket and what's draining your bucket. And again, another fantastic SEL slide that Pear Deck's already put. I changed it just to focus on filling as we were starting the year, and asked people to identify their why. And coming into the school year, there was some anxiety, as I'm sure many of you know and are still dealing with. There was some uncertainty, and it's my opinion that we can address that when we go back and we reflect on our why and our purpose. And so that's why this was one of the slides we also used in our opening meeting. And then a great benefit of Pear Deck that many of you are familiar with is publishing takeaways. So when I publish the takeaway, now as a teacher, I have this in a Google Doc, right? I can then go back and revisit this. We all have those difficult days when we're starting to ask ourselves, can I keep doing this? Is this the right career? It's been so hard. And to go back and take a look and see what you put down, and whatever that reason is, it's a pick-me-up. It drives you forward. And so that's sort of a combination of aspects, in that you get the pre-made slides, but then also publishing the takeaways for future use for yourself as the administrator to look at, or for your teachers to look at. And then the last example, we embedded a Google form for some group work that we wanted to do. Again, this is about being efficient, and it's about teachers understanding what is our goal of this meeting. Okay, there's going to be group work. What's it about? In this Google form, they were able to sign up for which groups they wanted to work in. Again, this is front loaded. So this is going out on Thursday. By Monday, I know all the groups. So I can put out an email. I can have a Google Doc that has all of the different groups that are going to be working together. We're not spending time, and people aren't saying, can you remind me where that list is? They're searching their email, whatever it is. I can just pull it up on the screen, and there it is. We know who signed up, and what they're going to be doing. So I would say for us, for our faculty meetings at Bullis, with Stacey's help and support, we've just found so many different options to work with and support our faculty through the use of Pear Deck. I'll be honest, we don't use it every meeting, and I think that's modeling as well. I want to be intentional. I want to be thoughtful about when we're using it and why we're using it, just like we want our teachers to do the same thing when they're finding a tech tool to use in their classroom. So I strongly encourage folks to try this out in their meetings. It's helpful, as I said, putting it out in front with some front loading on your end gives you so much information to have an effective and meaningful meeting. And it also can be fun in the moment, depending on the questions you're asking and where you are. I mean, colleagues love seeing each other's responses up on that screen. Stacey showed you that view. That's so great. Some of our artists do a great job on the identify the why in your bucket. Some artists do some less great jobs that get a good chuckle out of the crowd. So we've really found it to be successful and useful. And I encourage you to give it a try.
Yeah, and I'll just say from the teacher perspective, sitting in that meeting, for me, because Bobby sends this out in advance, and I'll show you what I mean by that, because I saw at the beginning there were a couple of people who asked some navigation questions, but I am not the person who would raise my hand and answer all these questions that Bobby asks during the meeting. But because he sends it ahead of time, I'm able to think about my response. I know that my response is going directly to him. He'll see my name attached to it. So again, he can follow up with me if I ask a question where I'm asking him to follow up with me. But also, it will be displayed for my colleagues, but without my name attached, because it's all anonymous when it gets projected. And so I can contribute in a different way than I would be able to otherwise. So for me, as somebody who needs some time to think about things, I do so much better in that meeting because I know what's coming and I had a chance to think about some of my responses before I head into that meeting. So it gives me the opportunity to take in that meeting time in a whole different way. So that experience has been fantastic for me. And what I love about the way that Bobby does it also is that it's not just about that student-paced Pear Deck that we all do ahead of time, like he was saying, because he does share it with us and ask us, please complete this by Tuesday. And so we have several days to work on it. But then during the meeting, he pulls it back up on the screen. And I will just show that right now. You can toggle between student pace and instructor pace at any point. So not everybody knows that you can toggle between those two views. So even though it started in that student pace mode where everybody got the link and was doing it for quote unquote homework, you can stop that student pace mode, pull it up again in the classroom or in our faculty meeting, stop that student pace mode, and then we are still able to see each other's responses. And I think that is part of the power in the way that Bobby handles this, is that we see it in the meeting, so that first of all, it feels like, okay, my responses were being read, but also I'm able to share what I said with my colleagues, and we're able to enjoy like the artistry or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So
one thing I would add, Stacey, I appreciate you sharing that. And then one thing I would add too is that you have an opportunity to really build trust if you're willing to put yourself out there. And I'll give you an example. Last year, we had a meeting, I think it was right before Halloween. And so I put just a question in there, what was your favorite costume as a kid? And somebody responded, I didn't grow up in this country. Not everyone celebrates Halloween. And it would have been very easy for me to just email that teacher and apologize and say, I'm sorry, I should have thought of that. But I didn't. I did send that email, but I didn't just hide that. I then put it up there. And it was a great reminder, I think, for all of our teachers that sometimes we ask questions without thinking about everyone in the room. And it was a great opportunity for me to show people in the room, that we're all fallible. We're all going to make mistakes. We're trying to, our intent is one thing and it comes out a different way. And so I just see that as a great opportunity for you to be able to build trust with your team when you're showing those responses. And I don't know if I'd ask that person just live in a meeting, if I asked the room, share at your table, I don't know if he would have said that, to Stacey's point. But because he was able to put it there, no one knows, whose name is attached, as Stacey said. It was just for me, it was a great lesson, and I was happy to be able to share it out.
All right. So those of you who are in our Pear Deck, how are you feeling right now? And if anybody has a specific question, go ahead and drop it in the chat just so we can see it. So somebody asked how I can see the various views, like how did I get to that grid view? So that's in the top left corner. There are 3 different views on this question. Sometimes there's 2 different views, but this overlaid view is great for any draggables. The grid layout shows them all in the grid like this. And then the last layout is the list layout, where it would be one under the other.
Hey, Stacey, obviously, and I was looking at the comments, some people are talking about very large groups. We have a faculty of about 75, which is a lot of answers. Could you just share again, since you just showed me this recently, how I could star specific answers, because we might not be able to get to all of them?
Yes. So that comes in the teacher dashboard. So I'm going to pull that up. And my computer is going a little bit slow. So I know people were asking, like, why are we capping it at a smaller number? And part of it, for me, honestly, is just because we are live streaming at the same time, and it bogs down my device. So usually you can use Pear Deck. I've experienced no trouble using it with 100 people, but when I'm doing the live stream at the same time, it's a little bit of a different story. All right, so I'm going to pull up the teacher dashboard. So this does have some people's names on it right now, but we're just dragging our dot on that one. So hopefully it's nothing too private there. And so what you can do is, whoa, this is just slow. I'm sorry. You can star a response right here. And if I star an answer, what that does is only the answers that are starred. So let me just go ahead and star 3 answers. Only the answers that are starred are going to show up when I project it. So that can be a way of hiding all the answers except for the ones that you've starred. So instead of seeing all those answers like I saw before, now you can see I only see 3 of them. I'm sorry for my delay is just an internet issue, not a Pear Deck issue.
So in that case, as Stacey was using that example, obviously with all the dots, it was great to see, but, the one where I showed the pyramid, that's almost a full slide. So even when you do the view, you're not getting more than 1 or 2. And so to scroll through 80 slides is going to be a lot, especially if you want to draw attention to what people wrote. Even the same thing with the why in your bucket. So it's not a feature you necessarily need to use for all of your questions, but it is one that's nice to have for some, especially as some of you are talking about working with groups of, 100 or more.
Absolutely. All right, should we jump into using Pear Deck for some asynchronous PD? So I'm going to show a different Pear Deck right now, which was a PD that we did at the very beginning of the school year. So we moved some of our PD that we would have done live to asynchronous. And this was really great to engage more people and also to allow people to go through this at their own pace and to get slides that they needed. So Cami was an app that we just got school-wide this year based on some needs. And so I never actually did a live training. This was the way that I trained everybody. I did use the audio in Pear Deck. so that I could talk on some of the slides and just deliver a more personalized message to let people know kind of how to navigate this, to understand, to pick and choose what they needed. And it was also, just in the same way as Bobby was saying, this opportunity for me to model some ways that you can use Pear Deck for a student-paced type of activity, for more of a homework assignment, not something that we're doing specifically in class. And so I tried to use a lot of the different features that I think are some of the best ways to use Pear Deck within this. So I embedded everything in the Pear Deck. And so I kind of started, even though this wasn't part of the learning, a new tool, I started with how I would always want to start a class. Started with a check-in. So this was a slide that I had actually shared as a template that people might want to use, but I was able to embed it into this activity so people could see not just that this is a template, but here's how you might use it. So did a couple of introductory activities. As you can tell, I use the Pear Deck template library all the time, and I love their images there. So I pull them in, and then I just change the questions based on whatever I need, but it jazzes up my slides a little bit. And then I embedded a Flipgrid in here so that we could see one another. It was a nice way to start off the school year, and a nice reminder to everybody how well Flipgrid does embed into a Pear Deck. And then let's dive into the actual learning. So at this point, I just did kind of a tutorial step by step. Step 1, please go ahead and install. And then step 2, make sure your settings are right. And then I really allowed people to engage with this worksheet that I had created, so that I think it's very powerful all the time to allow teachers to see the activities from the lens of the student first. And so when you do that, you understand how this tool works. So I had a worksheet, then people could click out, it would open in another tab, and they could engage with the actual worksheet, play around with it, see how all of this worked. I'll just show you what it looked like. Let's see. Every time you log into Canvas, you have to choose your Google account again. Maybe I won't show you how that works right now. And then I had them watch a video. And something that I like to do is watch the video and then be able to take notes. So this is a nice way to show teachers how to have students go through an activity and take notes as they're going through this activity at the same time. So watch the video, and then really the space is just for people to take notes or to ask me questions. And I loved that part too, because people, as they were watching this, thought of takeaways, and they also thought of many, many questions. And so instead of, if I had it just as like, here's the PD that you're doing, if you have questions, please email me, I know that I wouldn't have gotten a fraction of the questions that I got. But by leaving the notes section right here, people were watching the video and they just typed in there right away. They didn't need to start an email. They didn't need to open an email, wait to finish the PD, because people were doing this in multiple days. It wasn't just one day for some of them. And so that was really nice to have that there. And then I did embed a Google form, much like Bobby was showing. It was just a nice, easy way to get a lot of information from people. And the reason I like using Google Forms sometimes is it organizes the information differently, because in a Google form, I can look teacher by teacher, whereas in a Pear Deck, I'm really looking at answers slide by slide. And so it's just a different view for me. And then it just more like here are a bunch of tutorials. And again, just use this note section to type any notes to self, because at the end of this, I published the takeaways so that everybody got their takeaways and they got all their notes that they had taken, so that they had all the resources and all of their notes in one Google Doc. So now they have that to reference at any point in the year, what they were thinking as they were doing this, and all the tutorials that I have. So that's really it. It really just making sure that I leave teacher tutorials, student tutorials. I think both things are very important. They help teachers get started because they can just use those tutorials. Also, though, I do try to ask questions like, all right, think about how are you going to have students submit this work? What method are you going to use? Because I gave them a couple of options. And we know how powerful it is with students to ask them specific steps, like how are you going to get to the next phase? Or what is your next step going to be? What are you going to do as soon as class is over today? So I tried to do that same type of activity with teachers in this, asking them, which method are you going to use? Because the reality is that was a really tough question, but you might not have even realized that it was such a tough question if I hadn't asked it. So this was one of the questions that I got the most engagement and follow up with teachers because they typed something and I realized that that plan seemed solid because it seemed solid on paper, but there might be some issues. And I was able to follow up and address that before school even started, before a teacher had tried something that wasn't going to be super successful. And with a new tool, we always want to make sure that the first impression is a good impression for students. Otherwise, it's very easy to turn them off of the tool. So that was basically it. Then everybody practiced. So they were able to practice. And then again, just submit it. So I'll get to that last step where they actually completed one and they shared it and then they just put it in here so that I had a list of everybody's all in one place, everybody's CAMI document, and I could just easily go through them. I didn't have 50 different emails from 50 different teachers. Then some bonus, some reference material, and then kind of ending with some exit ticket of like, what was a standout moment? I just wanted to hear what people were thinking. Go ahead and what's your goal? What's your next thing you're gonna do? And what are 3 steps to get there so that I knew how I could support people in the next step. What's next up for you? And then is there anything else that you have a question about? And then I stole this from an idea that I saw in a Pear Deck PD that I did this summer, just check mark when you're done. So I knew when people felt like they were done and I could start following up with them. So that's that. I feel like I need some questions. I need to take a pause for some questions now. All right, maybe I shouldn't because there's too many questions in there and it's hard to scroll through. Maybe we'll just get to the end because we're kind of almost getting there. So some of the major benefits, I've already talked about these, are really just to model. It was a great opportunity in me building this Pear Deck to model many of the things that I wanted to model. So I didn't actually have a Pear Deck specific workshop for these people who were doing the CAMI one, but I almost didn't need to. I got people interested in using Pear Deck just through the way that I was using it. And also, I think it's just so powerful to allow teachers to experience it from the student end because we are so used to, as the teacher, like looking at Pear Deck from the teacher end. Of course, because Bobby uses it all the time, I don't have to worry so much about that. Teachers are constantly able to see it from the student end. But that is a major thing. It looks different from the student end than it does from the teacher end. So it's very nice for teachers to be able to experience tools as a student because many times the dashboards are very different. And then the last thing was just that it was so easy for me to identify who had engaged with this because I knew who logged into the CAMI PD that I was showing you. And I knew what questions people had and I just emailed them individually. That was how I approached it. And from that, I had some fantastic conversations. And this was yet another case where some of the people that I engaged with the most in this way were people that I don't usually engage with because I had never done such a full like mini course as this one was before. And it was very, it was great. It was a very different type of experience than I even could have reimagined, and it was very different than it would have been if we had been live. And that's not to say that we're not still creating some live opportunities, but for some people, it is just so much more welcoming when they have the time and space to do this at a time that best fits them. Because for some people that is in the evening, for some people that is on the weekend. That's just when they have some time where they can have some quiet time to get most creative and to really be thinking about it. So that was one of the best things about it. All right. So let's get into some wrap up. I am going to leave this question in the Pear Deck, and then I guess we can start identifying. I know the Pear Deck team is going to help us start identifying some major questions that were dropped into the chat. Oops. Sorry. Oh, could you use a word cloud? Yeah, we can add that to the +1 feature request from Pear Deck. Bob and I were just talking about that recently.
Yes.
I wish.
Stacey, there's a question about embedding Google Forms or also embedding Flipgrid. Could you share that?
Yes. Let me grab a slide. Is there another question while I get this ready? I see another question about Cami. I'll answer that while this is loading up. The free version does allow students to write with the pen on any PDF, and it saves it to Google Drive. So that should all work. I don't know I don't know if there's any limitations of using it with Google Classroom with the free version. I don't know that answer, but I was using the free version of Cami for years and just really using the pen tool, and the pen tool is free. It's when you get into like the voice and the video feedback, that is a paid feature. We just started using that this year, and it's been really nice to be able to do the video and the voice. All right, so now I'm in this Pear Deck. How do I embed a Google form? I really just use the Pear Deck, the website slide, and then I literally just paste in the URL. So you just paste in, not everything embeds beautifully, but a Google form, all you do is you paste in the Google form URL right in here. YouTube, you can also embed a YouTube in right here. Flipgrid, just the Flipgrid topic code, you add it right here. And when you add it, I will let you know that you're not going to see it on the screen, but you'll see it right here as in the preview, and you'll know that it loads up really nicely. And after you know that, you press update slide, and then it just displays as a bottom bar. But as long as that preview looked nice, students will see it. And from the student view, they'll see it side by side as you did when I was going through things. On the teacher end, though, here's another limitation of looking at these things only from the teacher end. You don't see that side by side view. You don't see it embedded, only when you start the lesson. What other questions do we have? Dashboard is a premium feature. That is correct. So the teacher dashboard is a premium feature of Pear Deck. So that's where I can go back and I can see the names attached. The other premium feature, the draggable and the drawing are premium features also. I'm not sure if the website is a premium feature or not, but I know the drawing and the draggables are paid features. Any news on embedding letters into draggable options? So there are some draggables, but they're limited. So yes, I agree with you that there's not everything. But when you go into the draggable, just for people who have not used all the options in the draggable slide types, it's not just the dot. There also are some like punctuation. There are some numbers. So that's very nice. I'm a math teacher. There are also some of the, operators like that, but there's not like letters and all of that stuff available. And you can add multiple dots. So I could have them do a question and kind of ask them to place, a division sign and a multiplication sign, so I can have fun with that. Is there a time limit option for student mode? There isn't, but you can start and stop it. So I can put this right now into student-paced mode, and then everybody's able to move through at their own pace. And if I want to stop the session and it's like done, you can't contribute anymore, what I can do is I can end the session. I can end this session right here. And when I end the session, students are not able to add anything else, but I can still go back into peardeck.com and I can see all student responses from the session. So after I close it, I can close the session, but still go back and pull up their slides. Even if I want to come back into the classroom, I could pull it back up in the classroom. Just I wouldn't allow students to work any longer. There isn't a way to add in a start and a stop time in Pear Deck directly though. Kami does not need to be specifically associated with Google Classroom, by the way. We do not use Google Classroom and we are using it. You do need to be a Google school and to be using it through Google Drive. It's embedded in Google Drive or synced with everything in Google Drive. I love this. Start slow. Yes. What other questions do we have? If you want to use the same presentation with a second group, should you keep a clean copy? Do you make a copy of the slides, or is this done in Pear Deck? So I create one Google slide presentation, and then I launch it multiple times. And I think what I'll do is I will drop in a link to some Pear Deck resources, and Pear Deck has a ton of them in their library also, but that is a frequently asked question that I get so much. I will show it to you now, but I'll probably say it quickly, and you might want a video to look at later. But pretty much you just keep the Pear Deck slides open kind of all day. So say I'm presenting this for my 4 different blocks. I leave the Google Slides open, and then I just start a lesson. And I start that lesson with my 4 different blocks. And so that's how I do it. But in the video that I will share, that will give you a lot more tips on how to keep things organized, how to name things by block so that you don't get them confused, and you can go back and reference them later. What else do we have? Did you just add a required text box to those pre-made slides? I'm not exactly sure what that means.
I guess, Stacey, I wonder if they're talking about like the pictures in there. If you're asking about the pre-made ones that Pear Deck already has, they have the library there. Oftentimes there are questions that they're asking that you can then go ahead and change as you see fit for your topic or the questions that you have. So for example, the what's filling your bucket, that one that I used, I changed that to, what is your why that's filling your bucket? And I took out the part about what's draining your bucket, if that's what the question's asking.
Yeah, that might be it. So yeah, pull in this slide, you just click on it, and then you can change any of the text. You could even change the image, but I don't know why you'd want to change the image. The only thing you can't touch is the bottom bar. So this bottom bar right here, you have to leave that, otherwise it's not an interactive question anymore, but you can change any of this text right here. That's totally fine. Customize it.
I see the question, Stacey, about people using it as a quiz. There's definitely, conversation, I'm sure, at every school, just like at Bullis right now, about assessments and how are we doing assessments if we're remote or even hybrid with some in the classroom and not, and talking about more formative assessment. So we do have some teachers that are using this for a type of formative assessment. So some would use it as a warm-up activity or an exit ticket, but others are using it, just like there are other tech tools as well.
What other questions do we have? And we're gonna drop this slide in the chat. You'll see Pear Deck will share that soon in the chat, so you can reference some of those videos. Let's see what else we have in here. So if you're a Microsoft school, you can also use Pear Deck. I am logged in with a Google sign-on and I use it through Google Slides, but there's the option to use it through Microsoft also and through PowerPoint online. So that is definitely an option. I'm not an expert in that. I don't use it that way very often, but that would be an easier way to use it with Microsoft Teams, as I'm assuming you're probably a Microsoft district.
The question on there about our staff's favorite portion of it. I would say it is the opportunity to get questions out and share concerns ahead of time, things that they might not put in an email maybe, or again, if we're not seeing each other as often as we'd like to because of the current situation, people are just able to respond to those questions, and I'm able to ask questions and get information from them. So I would say that's probably the part that they appreciate most. Stacey, I don't know if you've heard otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go back to the question. I saw a couple overlapping questions on how do I get back to some of the responses later. So I will just show that. If you go to peardeck.com, that's where you get the session, all the sessions that you've run before. So you go back to the sessions tab right here, and that's where you can find the, it's loading still, but that's where I can easily click on, here's the projector view. So that would always be anonymous. That's what we've been showing. But then I can go back and I can get the teacher dashboard. And so I can open that up with student names. And that's something that I can easily review after class. So you can see that a lot of times I just leave my sessions opened. I'm not good at closing them. I end them so that I can publish the takeaways. But I don't know, I don't close that many of them. But when you close it, then you can't open the projector view anymore. And so that's really how I reference all of these later. And I guess I was practicing opening some things here, but this is also for organization, especially if you're doing it for multiple blocks, make sure that you're naming them. Here's a way that you can name the session if you forgot to name it, so that you can keep things organized and tidy and go back and follow up with individual students if you need to.
I saw a question in there just about responses, about paragraph response. So you can set that, it can be, there's so many different responses that you can get, whether it's multiple choice, draggable, thumbs up, thumbs down, and you certainly could get lengthier response as well. I just think anytime you are asking questions, and this is really important, again, going back to the trust factor that I'm trying to build, just be prepared to read them. Right. And then so just thinking about how many people are you asking this question to and how much time are you going to give it? Because if you're not going to give it the time that it deserves, then you shouldn't ask it.
Yeah, that feedback loop is so important. Something that is kind of nice is when you're asking like kind of a longer type question, which sometimes, you know, you ask something which is a sentence or 2 sentences long. This all happens in real time, like you saw happening here. So I can see as students are typing, how they're typing. So it's not something where I have to wait until a student presses the submit key. In real time, I can kind of see who's getting started, who's not getting started, and I could follow up with them very quickly. Is Pear Deck always anonymous? So there's 2 views, and this view right here is always anonymous. This is the main projector view. That is anonymous. No student names are ever going to be attached there. But what I can do is I can open up the dashboard in a new window, and that's going to have student names attached to it. So this is what somebody had asked earlier. That is a paid premium feature, getting that dashboard. And then I can see the student names there. So that would have a name for every single student. Do we have any other major questions? Let's see. Do I have any slides that I missed? I should get to the end, right? You won't let me go anymore. It's like frozen. Well, I'll get there eventually. I wanted to put our contact information back up. My computer's tired. I'll get to that eventually. Anything else?
I think there's a great question on there about a pre-service teacher talking about would they be making waves if they started to use it during their student teaching. You know, quite honestly, I think you'd have a better understanding of the group that you're working with than we do. So it's difficult for us to answer that. What I would say is, though, you would be getting engagement from your students. You're getting engagement from colleagues, from peers, and that's really what we're aiming for. You know, and especially in the time that we're in right now, is how can we not only build but maintain and sustain engagement and keep our students involved, or in our case, our faculty and our teachers involved in building that trust and developing relationships. So I would recommend it. But again, I think it's going to depend on your situation.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
A great question there. Making it available a week ahead to some staff disengage. I think that's a great question, Stacey, for, you know, obviously for the faculty meetings, but then also for the work that you're doing when you put it out. I think that's always a danger. And quite honestly, I never wanted to share the agenda until the afternoon of the meeting, because I didn't want people already, right? In my mind was, they're going to be making conclusions about what we're going to discuss without actually having the information. And you know, what I found out is people just appreciate having more information, right? It's when they don't have it that they start to make up their own answers. You know, when it's dark outside and we can't see, we start to imagine what's there, even though it's really not. And so the more light you can shine by giving information, I think the better off you are. And Stacey, I know your thoughts from a PD perspective.
I also think, though, that faculty meeting time is able to shift. So, you know, some of the things that you put in the Pear Deck, you don't go over again. Like, it was in the Pear Deck. You already shared that information. So you don't need to, it's not a waste of a time, but you don't need to like take that extra time. So you've opened up so much more time during our faculty meetings to do the thing that is more fun, which is sit around the table with colleagues that we don't necessarily see on a daily basis, and be able to exchange ideas and actually talk to one another, instead of just listening to all the information that you have to deliver, because it's very important information that we need to know, but some of it is just that. It's just information that we can really read.
Right. I mean, there's certainly people that have left a faculty meeting, maybe some of you in this talk right now, saying that could have been an email. And so that we definitely try to get some of that. There are announcements that have to be made, and those are in the Pear Deck, and you see them. So I think that's a good point.
Great. All right. I think we're at the end. Are there any other things from the Pear Deck team? I guess some people have asked, a couple people have asked with the resources. There's a bit.ly link with our slides that was shared, and then there was another link with some of these resources right here. They were two different links. So Pear Deck just dropped them in the chat, so you can grab all of those. And this will be available on Pear Deck's YouTube channel. I saw a question about how to watch the recording. All right, and if you want to reach out to us, please feel free to. The best way is through Twitter, if you're on Twitter. For me, I would be happy if you reached out through an email. That would be fine with me also. The easiest email is probably just my name, my full name @gmail.com. If you have any technical questions and I can help you out with that, please do feel free to email.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's been a fantastic evening, and thank you, Stacey, for helping us get through as well.
Yeah, thank you for, I think this partnership, as much as we can partner together in all the different roles that we have at schools to model what we hope to see in the classroom, it's so powerful. Again, allowing teachers to experience it so that they can feel it, get that empathy from the lens of student, right? Because that's very big. I think it can make it so much more powerful for what teachers can then do with students. So yeah, I appreciate everyone joining this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.